Well, let's talk about this with Conservative MP, Colonel James Sunderland. Good morning to you, James.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. I do want to talk to you about, in terms of your former job in the military, about this Russian fighter jet smashing into a US drone as well. But first up, let's talk about the budget. It's a back-to-work budget, we're told. It's a budget for growth, we're told. Which of these measures do you think is actually going to help achieve growth and which is going to get people back to work?
Well, there's a core friction here, Julia. The country's £2.5 trillion in the red. We borrowed £500 billion for the pandemic. And any measure that the Chancellor announces today has to be balanced against the fact that the money has to come back into the Treasury too. So this is about fiscal pragmatism. It's about doing the right thing in terms of our national debt, bringing our interest payments down by paying some of it off, but also do what we have to do to get people back into work. And that's the focus, I believe, for today.
Well, OK, we've got this childcare measure. I can understand why you want to subsidise childcare for people on low incomes who are saying, look, basically, after I'm taxed, and again, we've seen the tax thresholds going up and up and up, or go down and down and down, actually, that actually it's not worth my while. I've got about sort of 20 quid better off, but I'm not being with my child all week, so there's no point me going back to work. That would make sense, getting those people back into the working world. But why would a couple earning almost 200k be entitled to subsidised childcare?
Well, I think there's certain things that have to be provided for everyone. What you've got to do is incentivise people back into work. And whether you're a couple earning 200 grand a year or a couple who's earning less, I think whatever happens, we have to make sure that people are incentivised to get back into work.
Sorry, people earning 200k don't need to be subsidised, don't need to be incentivised or subsidised to go back to work. That's an absurd waste of taxpayers' money. There'll be people paying tax who are on, average incomes around 30k who are helping to subsidise the childcare for someone earning more than 3 times what they earn. That's absurd.
Well, it's not absurd because I think it's very difficult to put a comparison into a measure. So, for example, where do you draw the line? Where's the cut-off? How do you say that somebody's too wealthy to be able to afford their own childcare? My point is this.
I'd say someone on 100k is too wealthy to afford subsidised childcare.
NHS care is free at the point of need. It's available to all. I think it's the same provision with childcare. You've got to incentivise everyone. No.
There is an argument for that, but let's have that as a general debate. Then I mean, we have free schooling from 4+, 5 for all children available, but we haven't until now had that. And again, also the cost of this, it doesn't actually cover it doesn't cover more than about 2/3 of the cost of actually providing that childcare.
Well, I disagree. I think it's absurd to say that you're too wealthy to get 30 hours of childcare for your children. We all need to get back into work. We all need to get people incentivised.
People earning 100 grand a year, a couple earning 200 grand a year. There aren't many of them, to be fair. The idea they need subsidising for anything other than, I don't know, their weekends on yachts is absurd. It's ridiculous. It's nonsense. I mean, how many people in this country are we going to put on the payroll? We're subsidising, we're subsidising childcare. We're subsidising people's rent. We're subsidising people buying food. We're subsidising paying for kids' breakfast at school, their lunch at school. I mean, why don't we just move everyone into internment camps and just pay for everything and take away any role that people have as parents, as families, to look after themselves?
Well, what you've just listed is a whole range of excellent measures that the government's got in place at the moment. We are doing everything we can to incentivise people back into work.
But for people... Listen, if you need incentivising to go back to work on 100k, then you need your head examined. But there we are. Let's also talk a 1-year extension of the 5p cut in fuel duty. That's a £6 billion cost. But we've still, of course, got VAT at a huge rate on that duty. 3-month extension of the energy price guarantee, we're told, is going to happen. That's keeping the average bill to around 2.5 grand a year for the bills. Again, still a huge increase on what people were paying, more than double beforehand. But that's a £3 billion cost. Do you think that's going to be extended again, or was that just a necessary measure to get us through yet another cold spell where people need to have their heating on?
Well, look, I think we've got to find that balance again between supporting people and also not spending so much money in government spending. What we have to do is increase, I think, that subsidy. We're doing that. It's important that the government shows that we are supporting people who are currently facing huge heating electricity bills, that's the right thing to do. So this is government that does care. Government wants to try and strike the balance.
Okay.
And with the cost of living at the moment what it is, I think it's the right thing to do.
There's also going to be help for much higher earners in terms of their pensions lifetime allowance going up from 1 million to 1.8 million. These are huge sums of money, even over a lifetime, and it's going to affect 2 million higher earners. But the crucial thing here, we've got a load of NHS GPs and consultants who've said there's no point me working when I'm being taxed at 55% on this. I may as well give up now. This is about getting crucial key workers in the public sector to stay on or even go back to work. Do we think that will help solve the NHS waiting list issue that we've got right now?
Yes, I think it will. I think it's pragmatic as well. I mean, at the moment, you've got doctors in particular, surgeons, consultants who have retired, having maxed out on their pension schemes. It's entirely right that those people who may be in their 50s or even younger can come back into the workforce. So that will help with GP surgeries, it will help with queues, it will help with waiting lists. What we have to do is incentivise people back into work, and I think that's the focus of the budget today.
We've got national strikes today. We've got teachers, the National Education Union, BMA junior doctors, university staff, PCS union civil servants. We've also got in London tube drivers on strike as well. 1.5 million days lost to strikes over the winter period. Is there any sign that this is going to come to an end? Because it seems as we start the serious pay talks with one set of unions, the next set of unions go on start their strike action.
Yeah, it's quite boring, isn't it? I think ultimately, let's get back to work. You know, I have every sympathy with key workers in particular who are struggling. We've got to do what we can to help them. The unions are meeting the government. We are doing the best we can with the money available. But what I would say is please get back to work. Well,
if we weren't subsidising childcare for people on 200 grand a year, we'd have more money to get those people back to work with pay rise.
I take your point, Julia.
I'm just saying priorities. This, of course, the corporation tax rise from 19% up to 25%. It's been long planned. Jeremy Hunt has said he's still going ahead with this. Massive ill feeling about this on Tory backbenches. We know that many companies, big and small, very much opposed to this. Do you think that's the right measure?
Well, it's a funny one, isn't it? I mean, I'm a low-tax, low-state Conservative, ultimately.
The Chancellor says he is as well, so does the Prime Minister.
And I just want to see tax reduced across the board. But for as long as we are £2.5 trillion in the red, the Chancellor has to put money back into the Treasury.
OK, let's also now talk about the area of defence. We're going to see the defence budget up by $5 billion over 2 years, so not very much. And certainly when we see China going to 5% of their GDP on their defence spending, basically a war footing, perhaps we really should be considering a much bigger increase there. But we've seen rather worrying developments over the Black Sea yesterday. At about 6 o'clock UK time yesterday morning, it appears that a Russian fighter jet, well, 2 Russian fighter jets, intercepted a US surveillance drone. One of the Russian fighter jets actually clipped the drone, which then plummeted into the sea and was destroyed. It's £26 million, 20-metre wingspan drone. This is a huge, big aircraft. Big concerns about this, escalating tensions between Russia and the US and NATO as well. The Russians are saying that the US was showing provocation by flying so close to the Russian border. Joe Biden accused Moscow of reckless actions. Are you concerned that this is exactly the sort of, well, not quite an accident, it would appear, but exactly the sort of act that could lead to an escalation into a wider war?
I think those risks, Julia, have always been there. We've got a congested area, congested airspace. Ukraine and Russia are at war at the moment, and NATO is, of course, doing what it can to assist Ukraine. So we do have air assets up, we have surveillance assets up, and these things can happen, and that's what's happened yesterday. So I would simply urge all parties to employ rhetoric, which is not inflammatory. We need to be having discussions with the Russians, as indeed we are doing at the moment, and making sure that this does not escalate.
But this was international airspace, and it was I think 60 kilometres off the Russian border. I mean, they can't complain about a US drone in that airspace. I mean, they were quite happy to fly fighter jets through the channel, well into close to our borders. But the accusations that the drones not only intercepted, they clipped the drone, that the 2 Russian jets had gone ahead of the drone and jumped fuel on it. you know, this wasn't an accident. And does that tell you that, I mean, that we've got a couple of Russian fighter jet pilots who went AWOL and did what their own thing, or that the Russians are willing to escalate things and we are going to get dragged into World War III?
Well, what's interesting, Julia, is if you look at the pattern of behaviour over the last 12 months, the Russians have been quite careful. The Russians haven't taken NATO on at all. The Russians haven't lobbed anything into Poland. What happened with the air defence missile was clearly an accident. And what we've seen is lots and lots of contacts, if that's the right word, with air assets across the Baltic and Black Sea over the last 12 months or more. And we haven't had these incidents. So I think the Russians actually have been quite careful in not necessarily taking on NATO. So I suspect that yesterday was just unfortunate. Perhaps the Russians are getting more desperate. Putin's made a catastrophic error by invading Ukraine. He's obviously meeting huge resistance there, supported by NATO. So, these things do happen, but we need to make sure that we contain it and have a good dialogue, which means that it doesn't escalate.
OK, thank you very much for joining us. Always appreciate your time. Conservative MP James Sunderland, a former colonel in the military here in the UK.